Hi everybody, it's me, Miss Lisa, and welcome to Stitch Kids. Today the project we are going to begin is a set of chicken chimes. Chicken chimes are based on a craft that is called a bell toda, which is very popular in India. The bell toda is made up of several small stuffed animals, usually chickens or elephants, that are made from fabric scraps. They are on a long string with beads, and there's a bell at the bottom. The bell toda is usually hung in a doorway and is believed to bring good luck to the people that live in that home. What I especially like about this craft is that it makes use of all kinds of little fabric scraps that aren't big enough to make anything else out of. The fabric scraps don't always match, but putting all the unmatched pieces of fabric together in one place turns out to make something really beautiful and fun to look at. To complete this project, you will need a supply kit from the South Huntington Public Library. Your supply kit includes 3 different colors of fabric, embroidery floss and regular thread, a piece of yellow felt and some assorted yarn scraps, a little bag containing beads and a bell, and a chicken pattern, as well as, the most important part, a big handful of polyfiber fill stuffing. You will need to provide your pin pal with pins and needles, a little jar of glue, and a pair of scissors. When you have everything gathered together, we can get started. First, you will need to prepare your pattern. Your pattern looks like this. You'll want to cut around the dark black line so that your pattern looks like this. My chicken chimes are made up of 3 chickens, and each chicken is a different color. You have 3 different colors of fabric in your kit, and we will work with them one at a time. So you can choose your favorite to work with first if you'd like. I like this nice bright blue one, so I think we'll start with this. Now, when we are sewing our chickens, we want the seam to be hidden on the inside, and we want the bright colors of the fabric to show on the outside. So when we are cutting the pieces of the chicken to sew together, we want to have the bright sides of the fabric on the inside of our project while we sew. So you'll see that the fabric has a bright side and a not so bright side. So let's put the 2 bright sides together. Lay your pattern on top, and you can put it right in the center of your fabric, and use pins from your pin pal to pin the pattern onto your fabric. Make sure that it stays as flat as possible. Use as many pins as you need. I think I'll use one more here to secure the body. You'll notice here that my chicken body pattern says cut 2. That's exactly what we're doing. We're cutting 2 pieces of this color. Now, carefully cut around the dark black line on your pattern to make a chicken shape. Take your time and cut as close to the line as you can. looks good. When you are finished, remove the pins from your pattern and put them back so your pins are just securing the fabric together. Set these aside here. Okay, now you'll notice your pattern also says that you need to leave the bottom of the chicken's body open for stuffing. So one way we can remember to do that is by putting a pin through the fabric that goes parallel to the, or I'm sorry, perpendicular to the edge of the fabric. When we start stitching, we'll start at one side at one pin, go all the way around, and we'll stop at the other. This will help us to remember to leave the bottom open for some stuffing. All right, now do the same with the other two colors in your kit. All three of the chicken's bodies are cut out, but we are not quite ready to start stitching. Remember how I said that anything we want to show on the outside of our chickens needs to be on the inside before we sew? Well, that's going to be the case with the beak and the tail. You have yellow felt in your kit, and you can cut your yellow felt into triangles or diamond shapes to make chicken beaks. According to our pattern, this thicker part here is the chicken's head, and the thinner part up here is the chicken's tail. So if I want the beak to stick out of the chicken's head when I turn the chicken right side out after sewing, I'm going to put the beak in so that the long part of the beak is inside the head. There's a little bit of fabric sticking out, that's okay. Use a pin if you have any extras to pin the body pieces and the beak together. Now we can trim away this little extra piece that's sticking out. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing with the tail. Each tail will be made up of 3 pieces of yarn. You can choose whichever combination of yarn you would like to have on your chicken. I'm going to use these 3, loop them around like this, so you have some little loopy looking tail feathers. And now we're going to stick them on the inside of the tail, like this. Cover it back up, and then do the best you can to try to pin the fabric together around those pieces of yarn. They might slip a little bit, that's okay. You'll be pinching this together as you sew, and that will help to keep the yarn secure in the chicken's tail end. You can trim these little extra bits off if you would like. And now you are ready to start stitching. If you'd like, you can do one chicken at a time, or you can prepare all of the beaks and tails before you start stitching and then stitch, stitch, and stitch. I think I'm going to work with one chicken at a time. I'm going to start stitching, then I'm going to do the stuffing, finish stitching, and then move on to the next bird. But you can do this in whichever order you like. And please remember that this is kind of a big project with a lot of stitching, so don't expect to get it done in one day. Do a little bit at a time. Remember, it's a good way to take some breaks from homework, or to do something on weekends when you don't have anything else to do. It's a nice project for doing a little bit at a time, so don't feel like you need to rush through it and do it all at once. For the stitching, you'll need to use the regular white thread that is in your kit, and you'll cut a good long piece of thread from the spool. Find a needle in your pin pal that has a small eye. You don't need a large eye for this. This is just a very thin piece of thread. And you can use your needle threader to make it easier to get that thread through the little tiny eye of the needle. So you'll see I put the wire part of the threader through the eye of the needle, put the thread through the threader, pull until the tail end of that thread comes through, and then put your threader in a safe place. Okay, we're going to work with a double strand of thread, so pull the tail all the way down to the other tail, and you'll match up these two ends and make a double knot. Like that. Okay. Now decide where you would like to start stitching. Remember, you need to keep the bottom open for some stuffing. And you're going to use a simple whip stitch, which is the stitch that just goes around the outside. And you would like to have your stitches be maybe 1/4 of an inch from the edge and fairly close together. This way the stuffing won't escape from the chickens. Oops, I'm getting the thread caught. And just go slow and take your time, going all the way around using a whip stitch. Okay, when you get to the beak, you have a couple of choices here. You can stop stitching and you can tie off your stitch by making a knot and trimming your thread, grabbing your glue and gluing both sides of the beak to the body fabric. However, I think it's easier to just keep on stitching right through rather than stop and glue and then pick up the stitches again. So you'll notice that you have the beak fabric between the two pieces of body fabric, and you'll just continue to use your whip stitch going straight through, pushing the needle through all of the layers. This will hold the beak in. It'll do just the same thing as the glue, and it might be a little less messy. Sometimes glue goes right through cotton fabric, so I don't like to use it unless I really have to. I prefer to stitch. Okay, there we go. Now the beak is securely stitched, so when I turn the body inside out, it should stay attached. Now keep an eye as you're sewing on the amount of thread that you have on your needle. If it, don't let it get too short, you'll have a hard time tying off to rethread. So just watch as you go. And if you run out of thread, tie off, rethread your needle, and continue. Okay, now I'm at the tail end, and the tail end can be a little bit tricky. Like the beak end, if you would like, you can add a little bit of glue to the body fabric on this side and the body fabric on this side under here. Pinch everything together, and that will keep the tail feathers in place. So you would stitch all the way to the end, stop here, tie a knot, add some glue, wait for the glue to dry, and then start stitching again on the other side of the tail. I'm going to do what I did with the beak. I'm just going to keep sewing, and I'm going to sew through here and try to catch some of this, the ends of this thread, catch some of the ends of the yarn with my stitching so that it stays in place. But you'll notice that some of this yarn is very close to the edge where I'm sewing. I don't want to stitch that yarn, so I'm just going to push that yarn back in a little farther with my finger so that I don't catch it while I'm stitching around the edges. This is a very challenging project. There's a lot of things to think about. Keeping the stitches even, keeping them close together, and not catching your embellishments while you sew. Okay, so far so good. Almost to the tail. Oops. That stitch didn't land where I wanted it to, so I'm just going to use the needle to pull it over to where I want it to be. Okay, I'm getting very close to a pin here, so I'm going to scoot the pin away from the edge so I don't poke myself. And you'll see that the needle is kind of going between these pieces of yarn. If it doesn't look too tidy, don't worry about it. This is going to be on the inside, remember. I'm going to just keep looping, trying to grab as much of the yarn as we can with the needle. And don't worry if you miss and the tail starts to fall out, we can always go back and glue it on. Not a big deal. Sometimes sewing projects are experiments. Sometimes certain techniques work, sometimes they don't. You just try again. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, I think the yarn on inside there is nice and secure. So I'm just going to continue all the way down to the bottom of the body. Okay, when you finish stitching, now it's time to remove all of the pins and put the pins back into your pin pal. And now it is time for the fun part, which is turning your project right side out. So we'll open up the hole in the bottom of the body and using your fingers very carefully push the rest of the body through that little opening. Go ahead and go slow and take your time so that you don't split the stitches that you just spent a lot of time making. If your fingers aren't long enough, sometimes you can use a pencil or a chopstick to help push the fabric through. Oh, there's the beak. This is so exciting. This looks like a finger puppet right now. And almost got the tail. There we go. Okay, nice. That turned out a little weird, I think, so I'm just going to use a scissor to trim that. There we go, that's a little bit better. Okay, now you're ready to add some stuffing to the open end. And you'll just take a little pinch at a time, and you can use your fingers to push the stuffing toward the head and the tail. Or like I said, you could use a chopstick or a pencil if that's easier. Just take a little bit at a time because the opening you left is probably not very big. And you don't need a lot of stuffing. We don't need the birds to be too full. Just full enough to make a nice shape, but not full to bursting. There we go. That looks good. And you can use your fingers to kind of squish it around to make sure that the stuffing is even so the bird isn't lumpy. To finish, you'll fold over each side of the body fabric and then pinch those folded pieces together. I know this is going to be a little tricky to get the body to keep its round shape, but we'll do the best we can. We'll use pins to pin these folded and pinched pieces together so we don't have to work too hard to hold them while we're stitching. We'll do the same on this end. Fold these finished edges of fabric in and then pinch them together, doing the best we can to keep the body of our bird round. Mine turned out a little square last time I did this, but that's all right. This is a handmade object. It's not meant to be perfect. Okay, that is pretty good. All right, so take your time with that. You might need to have a grown-up help you with the pinning while you pinch. Nothing wrong with turning this into a group project. All right, now we're ready to stitch up the bottom. Okay, before you start stitching, just be sure you have a nice long piece of thread on your needle. You probably don't need this much thread, but you don't want to run out part of the way through. Now we're going to work on making a hidden stitch. A hidden stitch is hidden inside this seam here. To do that, you're going to carefully push the needle through the inside of the fabric that's inside this seam. Grab both sides and then pull. We'll go back and trim off this little pesky piece of thread later. Pull that nice and tight. And then just do the same all along, trying to keep your stitches as small as you can and sort of on the inside. Oops, that thread's getting in my way. All right, let's try it again. Okay. Grabbing some fabric on the inside, on one side, inside on the other side. I think you can see that, and then push and pull the needle through. This can be a little bit tricky. It's very hard to hide stitches inside the fabric. Just do the best you can. And if it turns out that it's too hard, it's okay. You can do a simple whip stitch going across the bottom too. This is the bottom of your bird, so it's not a big deal. Okay, so go ahead and sew across the bottom. When you get to the end, tie it off and set this aside. When all three of your chickens are complete, we will add the beads and the bell. When you're finished sewing your chickens, it's time to string them all together with the beads and the bell. So for this, you're going to need your beads and you're going to need your bell, a pair of scissors, and some embroidery floss. You will also need a needle with a wide eye. So let's start by threading the needle with a long piece of embroidery floss. So you might want to take the whole floss and unwrap it from your spool. You may have more than enough. We'll figure that out later after we start. Okay. The needle with the wide eye is here. The needle threader. So we'll use the threader to thread the needle like this and pull it through. Might have to give it a good tug since this is thick stuff here. Okay. Now pull this little tail all the way down to the other end and double knot both pieces of embroidery floss together. It's okay to leave some hanging off. We can always trim the excess. But let's make a double knot. And then smooth out the thread up to your needle. Oops. Okay, there we go. Nice and smooth. All right. The first step is to attach the bell to the bottom. Put the needle through the loop in the bell, and then put the needle through the embroidery floss down by the knot and pull it nice and tight so that the bell is hanging from your embroidery floss. Now we're going to continue to make this set of chickens look like this one. So you'll see that there's a bell, set of beads, chicken, set of beads, chicken, set of beads, chicken, and set of beads. Your set of beads contains about 40 beads, and you need 4 different sets of beads. So I will let you do the math, which would work out to 10 beads in each set. So go ahead and count. You can make it even if you would like. If you don't want to make 10 in each spot, that's okay too. Just be sure that you leave some for the top. Don't put all of the beads in one section. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think I'm just going to do 6 here. And now I'm ready for one of the birds. So take your needle and push it up through the bottom of one of your chickens, and then you're going to kind of pinch the chicken like this while you're pushing the needle so that it comes out the top. Let's see if I can show you that there. Comes out the top like that. And then pull. You may need a grown-up to help you. And push the chicken all the way down to the beads. Like that. There you go. So they're nice and even, like this. And now we can add some more beads. 1, 2, 3. 4, 5, 6. You can make a pattern if you would like. 7, 8, 9, and 10. I'm just going random. Okay, now ready for the next bird. Push the needle through the bottom. And all the way through, pinching the chicken so that the needle comes out through the seam, and then pull. And fluff up the chicken if it gets a little squished. And now you'll see, scissors are in the way, they're coming together in a chain. Time for more beads. I think I'm going to put 10 more here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And the last chicken. Push the needle through the bottom, pinch while you're pushing the needle up through the top, through the seam, and then pull all the way through so the bottom of the chicken rests against the top of those the section of beads. And now you can put the rest of the beads on the top. I don't think I have 10. I think I have more than 10. That's okay. I wanted a few extra at the top. All right, almost done. 3 more beads left. 1, 2, and 3. Push those beads down. Okay, and now we're going to make a knot in the top bead so the whole project doesn't slide off of the thread. So pinch the thread near the last bead. Use your needle to go through that last bead like this, making a loop. There's the loop of embroidery thread. Put the needle through that loop, and now you're going to tie a knot. If it slips, slide the bead down. Hold it as tight as you can, and let's do it again so we make a double knot to keep it in place. You might need some help with this. It's a little hard to hold everything and do the stitching at the same time. There we go. Now that's nice and secure. And now for hanging, you can remove your needle and make a loop in the top. So we'll loop the thread over like this. And then this is going to be almost like making a knot in our thread when we get ready for stitching. Wrap it around and pull the loop to make a knot. In this case, I don't think we need to make a double knot. That looks nice and secure. If you'd like, you can trim these tails here. I think I'll trim a little bit. And trim the extra thread down here at the bottom by your bell. And now it's ready to hang. Well, everybody, thank you so much for stitching with me. I hope you find a special place to hang your chicken chimes where you and your family can enjoy them. I'll see you again soon. Take care.